Then I would suggest that we start.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Sanjeev, let's start.
Okay, let's start.
When people have other engagements, there's no point.
Yes, let's
Ladies
start.
and gentlemen, so happy to welcome all of you today on this webinar. We're talking about what the interim budget means for the India growth story. Let me introduce myself. I'm Nakul Kamani. I'm the immediate past chairman of the Indo-American Chamber, citizen of Jamshedpur for 3 generations. I'm also on the National Committee of the Indo-American Chamber. And Commander Sanjeev Raman and I were discussing this, having a webinar shortly after the budget was announced. As it so happened, in this budget, there was no change in taxes, personal, corporate, nothing. So we decided that instead of doing any kind of in-depth analysis on what the budget would mean for the common people, we would discuss on what the government's policies for investment in this year ahead by way of our Honorable Finance Minister, Mrs. Sitharaman, the investments that she is talking about from the government, what this would translate into for India, for the various different industries that would get affected, and how it would percolate down to the common person. So in this connection, I am delighted to welcome personally Mr. R.K. Chajjar, who is our Eastern Region President, Professor H.K. Pradhan, who was on the screen for just a minute ago, Professor of Finance at XLRI, Mr. Subhojit Chakravarti, Managing Director, Price Waterhouse and Cooper, Professor Suman Mukherjee, Economist and former professor at business schools in India, UK and the US, Mr. Rajiv Basu, Partner, Price Waterhouse Cooper, Mr. Preet Jain, Rohan Bharadwaj, Nikki, etc. from Medallion and Finax Committee of XLRI, Mr. Sagar from the head office of IACC, and of course, my dear friend and the present chairman of Indo-American Chamber, Commander Sanjeev Raman. In fact, Commander Sanjeev Raman is also going to be moderating today's session, and we couldn't have got a more able person than him to do it. And I'm also very grateful to all of you for having accepted our invitation to join this webinar. I'm sure it is going to be very interesting and a very interactive one. Without further ado, I request Commander Raman to invite the first speaker, introduce him and carry on from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Nakul. At the outset, I would, before we begin with the session, when we conceived this entire program, we wanted the participation of the students community, and we have representation from both the FINAC committee as well as the Medallion Committee of XLRI. And I would request, first, Mr. Preet Jain to please share what exactly this committee do, and then followed by maybe Nikki or Rohan, who can talk about or share, enlighten us with the activities of the Medallion Committee. So first, I would request Mr. Preet, please, let us know what exactly these committees do.
Commander, just keep in mind, Professor Pradhan had just mentioned he has another engagement at 11:30.
Yes. So keep it very short.
Yeah.
A warm welcome to all our panelists and fellow attendees. The Finance Association at XLRI, aka Finax, was established in 1991 with a vision of establishing XLRI as one of the leading B schools in India. And what we do is basically every year we organize XLRI's flagship National Finance Symposium, which has special guest speeches and panel discussions from some of the leading industry experts and C-level execs. This year too, we had Mr. Navneet Munot, the CEO of HDFC AMC, who had joined in as one of our speakers. Essentially, Finax is instrumental in developing the finance compendium and preparing students in the field of finance. We also hold other sessions, such as one of the budget sessions that happens every year. And apart from that, we also hold alumni sessions, roll out our monthly newsletter, and provide live project opportunities to for the students of XLRI to have a real world interaction with the industry of finance.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Nikki. Please, if you can tell me something about the medallion.
Thank you, Sanjeev sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning to all the panelists and my fellow attendees. I'm Nikki, and we, the Medallion Committee of XL Batch, are an integral part of the Postgraduate Diploma in Finance program, responsible for organizing events, a conclave called Coalescence, and finance and practice sessions by inviting various guests from various industries to share their insightful experiences with us and build our network with industry stalwarts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we will start with our session on what the interim budget means for India growth story. And I will invite our very first speaker, Professor H.K. Pradhan. Before Professor Pradhan talks on this topic, I would like to give a brief introduction of Professor Pradhan. So Dr. H.K. Pradhan has been Professor of Finance and Economics at XLRI, Xavier School of Management, Jamshedpur, with over 38 years of experience in teaching, research, consulting, and policy. He has a master's from Utkal Universities and an MPhil and PhD from University of Pune and a Fulbright postdoctoral fellow at the Columbia University Business School, New York. Dr. Pradhan is presently a director on board CCIL, trustee director of Corporate Debt Management Fund set up by the ministry. He is also a member of the Research Advisory Committee of SEBI and National Institute of Securities Market, Mumbai. He served as the chairman of the Indian Commodity Exchange, Mumbai, member of the RBI Technical Advisory Committee on Financial Market, independent director of the SBI Mutual Fund, board members of Micro Credit Rating International Limited, a member of Index Option Committee of National Commodity and Derivative Exchange, including member of the Board of Governors and chair of doctoral program at XLRI. He has worked as a Pacific Regional Advisor for Commonwealth Secretariat London while serving concurrently as a resident debt advisor with the Ministry of Finance, Government of Fiji Islands during 2005 to 7. He has also served as expert for United Nations, Asian Development Bank, and Crown Agents London and the World Bank. He has extensive academic visits to universities such as Columbia Business School, University of Bonn and Institute of Mathematics and Applications, University of Minnesota, University of South Pacific Fiji, Al Abbas Institute, Dubai. Dr. Pradhan has published in high-quality journals in asset market and teach debt market and derivatives, international finance, risk management, and social finance. He has chaired as principal guide for 15 doctoral fellows in finance. So, sir, to take this conversation forward, because it is an interim budget, I would like your views. What is the India growth story and the fiscal consolidation which we see in this budget in general?
Thank you, Raman Saab. Thank you so much. And I think by mistake, I forwarded my CV, which I normally forward to consulting companies like PwC.
But
And,
sir, it's good that we got an opportunity to such an illustrious person we are hearing.
If you are in a train, you move. So I think that's what I have moved. But thank you so much. And it's nice to see Professor Suman Mukherjee, my colleague at Jamshedpur way back in 95. And nice to see him doing so well. And he has extremely very, very rich views in economics. And nice to collaborate with the Indo-American Chambers of Commerce. And I think FINAC students will definitely look forward to your collaborations partnership in future. Now, I think what I intend to do in this brief, the period that I have to, brief time that I have to speak, I would rather like to, put the perspective about the budget rather than giving the whole brief data or whole kind of statistics. So in an election year, this bring an interim budget, and therefore there are code of conduct by the Election Commission of India, and therefore the budget could not have populist announcement or could not drift away from the kind of policy making that it has. So therefore, there were no important revisions in taxes or subsidies in this budget. But I think what we need to understand is that the intent rather than the content of this budget, and the long run focus behind the budget of the government. And I think, quote unquote, I understand all of us probably would appreciate what is called the aspiring India. The promise that this policy government promises for the youth and the larger population in this economy. So therefore, I think the budget continues to have fiscal consolidation as the goal. And as far as the economics are concerned, and I think all of us, the data are in public domain, the revenue, expenditure, taxes, subsidies, they are almost conforming the policy continuity. They are all the trends upward. I think I didn't see any data that slips downward. So let me to start with make a quote of the legendary activist, the Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step forward." I think it is important to realize that the steps this government has been taking, in a metaphorical sense, the staircase, but I think the steps are in right directions, and I am sure all of us, I'm sure, are in sync with the government's, perseverance in pursuing the macroeconomic goal. And so therefore, what I see that if the government is determined to do the best what it could, I'm sure the standards and the bar would progress forward. But I think the principles have remained same all these years, starting from Dr. Manmohan Singh. And I remember the Manmohan Singh in his first budget, 1991, and he quoted the French philosopher, Victor Hugo, and he says, "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." I think India toiled with several ideas of liberalizations, opening up, responding to massive economic crisis in 1990s. But I think many of the dreams probably remained as dreams. Many we achieved, many we achieved. India could rise, but I think many of the dreams could remain. So fulfilling. So the aspiring India, what probably would aim at fulfilling those long pending dreams, which is which the India has. And I think it is contextual that I can also quote the Prime Minister saying that this is India's time. It is no different from what Manmohan Singh put up in 1991, but with a more determination and action. Every power, let me say, every power on earth now is looking towards India in several ways, whether economy, politics, society, or culture. So therefore, India is probably one of the biggest sweet spot in global arena, global growth. It also seeing the another kind of words that has been often coming in our discourse, that the PM's mission of Make in India, which now probably translate into Viksit Bharat 2047. And this is actually a bit of emblazes the kind of ornaments, the kind of progression that the government wishes to make, and positioning India as one of the developed country in the next 25 years. Hopefully the lost glory would be revived. And what everybody hears is and sees is this next years as India's Amrit Kal. So what I'm trying to see is that if the intent is good, the outcome shall be virtuous. And I think the Sanskrit saying which says, Yad Bhavat, Tad Bhavat. So jo aapka bhavna hai, wahi hota hai. Whatever you think is, you become. And I think that's extremely important, unless you have an aspiration, unless you have a vision for the future. And I think that probably now resounding in Indians' mind. And I think that's a good intent. So there are a lot of stories around, but I think the numbers tell us the story. India is the largest growing economy in the world, 7.3% growth rate. Is the fifth largest economy, and is expected to set the surpass Germany and Japan to become the third largest economy by 2027, 28 to 2030. And currently the GDP is $3.7 trillion. By 26-27, we expect to be $5 trillion, maybe a little later. But I think that's something is in the offing. So I think this is all of these stories are in minds of the politicians or policymakers that makes us coin this word aspiring India. And I think that flip to their growth aspirations is all around, which is a good symbol. So the budget, strikes a balance between fiscal consolidation and the most emphasis on investment in capital expenditure, and very importantly, along with physical infrastructure, the social digital infrastructure that has been the focus of this government. One of the contradiction that when a conflict come up between who takes the development role, whether the monetary policy or the fiscal policy. And I think the monetary policy has reached its limits, accommodative limits of liquidity and credit-focused growth momentum. I think it is up to the fiscal policy to take the larger stage of growth and development. We need support from fiscal policy in building capacity of growth and with equity and in inclusion over the next decades. And I think I will spell out this as to how this budget probably steers some of these agenda of the government if translated. So the finance ministers rightly said that our government stands committed to strengthening and expanding the economy with high growth and to create conditions for people to realize their aspirations. And I think it's a very profound statement. Increased focus on capital expenditure, roads, railways, and ports. Although the large part of this expenditure, CapEx has gone into the roads and railways because of the two powerful ministers there. There is a push digital again, IT, data, AI, innovations. There is substantial increase in social infrastructure, desirable housing, health infrastructure, sanitation, water supply. There is focus on credit to small borrowers, MSME, and micro borrowers through strengthening the self-help group movement. And I think that focus is extremely important. It was nice to see the group lending activities that goes around with microfinance institutions, the bank self-help group comes at a focus, and the NABARD would definitely play a very important role there. The focus on agriculture and farmer with more emphasis on insurance of crop, animal, and human, and climate and sustainability that one sees the focus in the budget, solar, green hydrogen, and electric vehicles. So I think these are some of the important area of the budget that I can see, and they are very much enduring. The PLI schemes, which was proposed, the production-linked incentive schemes in April 2020, continues to remain, but somehow I did not see much buzzwords in the budget, nor even rise in the allocations towards the PLI schemes. And as it is, a substantial part of PLI schemes remain in the electronics manufacturing, that to in mobile phones. The new area added are like specialty steels, high efficiency solar panels, textile, toys, and leather goods are actually very, very insignificant. And I think this is something which I thought the focus was missing in the budget. What was extremely noticeable in the budget, encourage to scale up research and innovations in sunrise domain. And I think that is extremely important, seeing the technological growth and the startup growth that happens in India. This will definitely fuel innovations. There is a visible trend in modernizing infrastructure in IT. India's IT infrastructure probably now compared to the best in the world, what you call India stack, which is making a massive change in how India spends, borrows, and access services, including financial services. And I think that's a very important provision in the budget. And I think what is probably not spelled out as much, but very briefly, is you need to have growth that should focus on vibrancy of capital market, and particularly bond market. And this, I think that is there, and there actually the work is happening quite substantially off budget. The Indian bond is now included in the sovereign bond index of JP Morgan, probably would attract a huge, possibly attract some $30 billion investment flows into India. India has now market capitalization of 4 trillion that rank 5th next to US, China, Japan, and Hong Kong. And our capital market infrastructure is probably definitely better than the best. And I think that's something that is no glitch, that is glitch free and very fast and efficiency and low transaction cost capital market infrastructure that we can see. And I think the government focus on Viksit Bharat emphasizes, though we didn't see much in the budget, the FDI, the foreign direct investments. So there is a lot of multinational corporations buoyance about the India prospect of investing in India, and what do you call the China plus one strategy, moving away from China, and also currently the 60% of Indian exports, what you see, are almost similar to compositions of the group of 7, and that's a huge shift in the quality of exports. Global offshoring and digitalization, energy transition, some of these mega trends probably could shape up how India modernizes its infrastructure and exports. But we actually did not see much of talk about exports, possibly because of the global recession and the kind of negative outlook that one sees overseas. So one of the area I think the finance minister pointed out is the conditions that should be created for more opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship. I think this is one of the most important area that could not have been bypassed. Half of India's population of 1.4 billion is actually working population, but there is substantial unemployment, which is the youth unemployment, where I'm sure, and women particularly. I think that is something remains to be the task of the government in future. India has to reap the demographic dividend that we talk about, provide jobs to the young populations emerging. And there is also a generational shift which is happening in India that is setting up the economic and social behavior. The millennials, what you call the Gen Z preferences, are going to significantly affect the way we spend, the way we live, and I'm sure that these are things that would dominate the discourse of coming future. The Indian middle class, that's going to rise quite significantly, and that remains. And so let me, I think, come up with one of the core, as I saw this budget setting up for the long term, is the finance minister's statement itself, which says the Atmanirbhar Bharat that we have focused on 4 areas. The 4 pillars, and they are Garib, the poor, Mahila, women, Yuva, youth, and Annadata, the farmers. And I think this focuses on equity and inclusion in the budget. We need to definitely focus on the growth of agriculture and its labor force. So therefore, there has been increase substantially in components of subsidies in Manrega or National Health Education Mission, Shakhyam Anganwadi Portion Program, PM Awash, Jal Jeevan Program, some of these desirable in the social infrastructure. So I'm saying that the budget definitely lays some kind of directions for future to have towards more equitable budget, though it did not have many of the large triggers that could come to capital market in terms of the taxes or incentives. But that is definitely many, pointing towards social and equity. Let me just say quickly, just 1 or 2 points that I thought are concerned for our economy. There is a slowdown in employment, particularly rural jobs, and at a stagnant blue collar and white collar workers in the formal sector. And I think that is visible. Even the campuses across management schools have seen that during this placement season. There is a large-scale reduction in the IT sectors in labor force employment, which actually boosted a lot of employment in recent years. And a substantial increase in temporary or contractual employment, a delivery boy is what you call. So that kind of and associated with the labor conditions, the social security provisions, and all kinds of things associated with that, the human side of those employment. There is some slowdown in private consumption and decrease in savings rate and increase in household indebtedness. And I think they possibly remain the short-term triggers for little macroeconomic issues. But otherwise, I find the budget possibly could have spelled out some of these macro trends, hopefully looking forward a full-fledged budget in July when the new government comes with power, whoever is the government. Thank you, sir. Thank you. These are my brief points. And I'm sure Professor Mukherjee, who is an eminent economist, we should look forward to hear him. And since I would not be available, gentlemen, all questions to Professor Mukherjee.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll meet.
Over to you, Raman. You are on mute. Mr. Raman, you are on mute here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for giving your views. But before you leave, and because you are a professor of finance, I have got one very small question. Maybe you can slightly elaborate, not take much time. We continue to see that or hear debate that US is coming out of inflation, or it is no more in inflation. Do you continue to see the FDI, pulling out of the capital market, which is the best asset class, or the India would continue to grow like that? FDI inflow will not stop.
I think, sir, I probably think you implied the capital flows for FII, if not so much FDI. FDI, true. The FDI India destination has enriched for a variety of reasons. And I think it is, again, the same geopolitical risk in many parts of in the world. And China plus strategy of many MNCs. And I think the Chinese governance structure, Chinese economy, and the Chinese markets, and all of them are creating concerns for many American investors, at least even including Europe. So one can see that there is here in 2023, and that is quite substantial historically. Many sectors in India, and you can see many states in India are able to attract huge FDI. So Indian growth story is now also in the states, and the development is completely it's getting decentralized and ICO. But as far as the foreign portfolio investment concerned, the silver lining definitely is the bond inflows, because the JP Morgan bond index and the government streamlining many ways the government securities sectors, corporate bond platforms, Gift City, and the harmonization of tax rules. I'm sure that will bring a lot of capital inflows into India. But as far as the Indian equity market is concerned, I think the Indian equity market, there is beyond this 50 or 100 stocks that were large caps where EPS probably have reached a very high. Sorry, the prices have become actually very, very high. But you can see a large number of non-large cap stocks, mid cap, small caps, or innovative stocks, technology stocks, or that startup stocks, upcoming markets where I think there's a huge scope for capital infusion coming in. So I can see potentially these investors are trying to explore the new value. After all, the equity market, you try to explore the value in future. You are not just investing because this year there was a 10%, 20% rise. You are trying to explore values. So I think India is a new value destination. There is a significant number of Indian companies are adding value. So that I think would be looked after by the foreign investors. And I'm sure there's a positive trend for more capital inflows in India. All depends on the macroeconomic political stability. It is the stability which will endure those flows. If there are instability and political crisis or macroeconomic instability, but I think Indian inflation is quite stable thanks to the RBI sticking to the target. And America, including Europe, all of them have not been able to come out of the inflationary trend. That probably would stay for some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pradhan. So we will move ahead with our discussion, and we have a very, very eminent economist, Professor Suman Mukherjee. Dr. Suman Mukherjee is an economist and highly respected academician. He has more than 50 years of experience in teaching and research, management consulting, and business training. Besides, he is also the Director General at the Bhawanipur Education Society. He was the former professor at XLRI and IIS WBM, which is in Calcutta, as well as a visiting faculty at the Salinger School of Business and Management in USA and Newcastle Business School in UK. Professor Mukherjee is also a professor in various other business schools in India. He is a fellow of AIMA, which is All India Management Association, an environmental fellow, US AEP, former director of Ernst & Young India, and consultant to NCAER. He's the author of the textbook. He's the author of the textbook of economic development. He is also a resource person for UGC Open University program for national telecast and has presented 18 programs on economic development and planning. He has been the consultant and editor of Perspective 2000 to 2003, a page dedicated to management sponsored by Indian Oil, initially to the Business Standard and later to Hindustan Times in Calcutta. He has been the USAEP Asian Delegate, World Bank Conference on Human Face of Sustainable Development in Washington in 1994. He has researched the green marketing strategy at Salinger School of Business and Management, and he has also been invited as an international observer to White House during Mr. Bill Clinton's tenure on the Conference on Small Businesses in 1995. He has presented over 50 papers at national and international conference in Delhi, USA, UK, and Australia, represented extensively on SME sector, a proponent of the global ancillarization model. He has been invited as a speaker to many international and global conferences conducted by CII, FICCI, IMA, and IICC. He has conducted corporate quiz management, awarded with Mother Teresa International Award for Excellence in Education, and always also been a TV guest on national and regional programs. So welcome, sir, to this seminar, and welcome. Taking this discussion forward from Professor Pradhan, what primarily the issues which he hinted is the intent of the bhavna, Sarkar ki bhavna. The intent is very, very essential, and there has always been a policy continuum, right from Dr. Manmohan Singh days till now. Maybe it has gone ahead with much more acceleration, with much more determination. So, sir, we would like to know what would be your views in this budget presentation which has been done, and in future for the emerging growth areas for the country, and as said, what is the motive for this growth? What would be the driving factor for this growth? Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you. And I'm a bit embarrassed with that long introduction. I'd be better off if you had actually given me more speaking time, because there's so much to say about this budget. Well, let me begin by saying, let me clear a few cobwebs of economic thinking which has been changed. Therefore, many people find it difficult to understand the emphasis of this budget. Manmohan Singh has been mentioned, and he was my teacher, as was Amartya Sen. So I will briefly touch on the credentials that we were taught in economics in the Delhi School of Economics of those days, where we thought savings will lead to growth. And that was primarily because we were looking at Harrod-Domer model, and the Harrod-Domer model suggested that growth is a fulcrum of two things: savings rate over capital output ratio. We had taken capital output ratio to be constant using the British capital output ratio of 4:1, and we concentrated on savings for years on end to push it up from 15% to 25%, assuring us of a 6% growth. That never took place, and we were looking at the Hindu rate of growth. The problem is, and that's what people have forgotten, that we never looked at the denominator. So instead of concentrating on savings, which has actually dropped, we've gone into the denominator where we are looking at digitalization and the use of technology to promote growth. So that's a major shift. The second shift that has taken place in the psyche of Indian thinking is we believed in balanced growth, where we thought if industry grows, it'll take the flab off from agriculture. And from the sixth plan onwards, where one of our professors, Raj Krishna, continued to say that a dog can wag a tail, but a tail cannot wag a dog. He says the success of industry lies on developing your agricultural sector, and industry should be dovetailed to the agricultural sector. So the model of believing that modern sector, which is actually 25 million people, 10% of the working population, and round about that even now, with the IT sector has gone up marginally to about 40%, but then even then the major sector of occupation continues to be agriculture. So if India has to really unleash growth, it has to be through the agro-based model, where we need to really develop infrastructure. We need to look into agricultural growth, and we came in with the Farmers' Bill, but for other reasons other than economic, that bill was stopped. Now that I feel was sacrilege, because agriculture, if you're talking about LPG and liberalization, then the most important sector that needs to be liberalized has to be agriculture. And if you're thinking, is that the model? I would say at the private sector, you know what is ITC? ITC is ITC today because it's looking at agro-based. If you're looking at a country, look at Australia, you would find that they are agro-based. If you're going abroad and bringing in chocolates and condensed milk and popcorn and what have you, all the food products, it is agriculture. So private sector has to penetrate agriculture. And as Professor Raj Krishna said, for that, you need 8 times growth in industry. This budget concentrates on areas that we've never looked at. We've looked at the blue economy 2.0, and that is 7.5 thousand kilometers of coastline where the poor and the downtrodden live. That's needed not only for fishing and harvesting resources, that's needed because now seas have become waste dumps. And therefore, if we use waste as a resource, because matter cannot be created or destroyed, we need create new products out of that, apart from saving marine life from dumping it there. So the SDG consciousness on blue economy, on keeping the economy clean, that has been stressed on this budget, because we are looking at blue economy, we are looking at animal husbandry, we are looking at all those products that enhance agriculture. Just the cost of production in labor being low is a giveaway. Your cost of production actually being determined by other factors. Now, what has really made a difference, and that's what I was saying, that instead of depending on industry to take away the slack from agriculture, we have now gone in for more or less, we have not been able to do it thanks to the political lobby of going against the Farmers' Bill, which I thought was a sacrilege, as I said. And now if you ask me why, because the whole idea of increasing exports come by lowering your cost of production. So if you're looking at what Swaminathan did once, saying that you have to have a minimum support price, you're saying keep the cost of production for granted, add 50% of the cost to that, and that's your minimum support price. If it's an equity goal, that's right. But if it's an efficiency-related goal, that's not right. Because the whole idea is to lower the cost of production. And if the whole idea is to lower the cost of production, you need penetration of private capital, you need research and development, you need to do capitalization of agriculture, and you need to really allow agriculture to be liberated to sell their wares the way there is, doing away with the middlemen and, of course, the mandis. You can't coerce people to go to the mandis because some people have created them and they want a rental on that. So there has been no transparent discussion to say what was wrong about the Farmers' Bill. In fact, what you can do is cover it up. So that's been a lacuna. And how much has it cost us? It has cost us very heavily. PM Garibi Kalyan Yojana, because once you play politics and say you can't do it for the farmers, then the government will turn around like a Manrega program, institute 100 days pay, but very few realize it's instituting disguised unemployment. If I have to generate jobs, it has to be for 350 days, not 100 days. The same is with PM's Garib Kalyan program. You stop liberalizing agriculture, so 810 million people, which is 60% of the population, has been given free food for 5 years, which is costing us 12 trillion rupees. Can the country afford it? So you play politics, you get back politics. There is very little to stop this government from coming back to power. But where the problem is as economists have not come forward, there has been no transparent discussion to what was wrong about the farmers' bill. ICRISAT research shows that it was the right thing. No fundamental thinkers in agricultural economics, I was a fellow once of that center, will actually decry this. So when you do this and you're looking at, let's create a Christmas and doles for people, it's very important to take care of your poor, but I believe in providing the fishing rod and not giving fish. And if you're stopping that model, you're actually hurting the country in another way. I thought Professor Pradhan, as I got the brief, would be talking about the deficits. You know, we always talk about the fiscal deficit, which is actually quite an acceptable thing because fiscal deficit includes expenditure, which includes capex. If one thing is happening good about the country, it is we are developing the infrastructure, and that is allowing an enormous amount of growth potential. And this has been a fundamental change in our thinking. Now, in economics, you have two models. One is, as I said, develop your industry and take away the slack from agriculture. And the million-dollar question is how? And the second question is, let's do away with balanced growth, keep a supply-demand equality, which was our psyche for 60 years. Even that has been shelved now. Now we are talking about Hirschman's unbalanced growth, develop SOCs, develop the infrastructure, and the DPAs, which is directly productive activities, will now respond. So it's a seesaw balance. Create more of opportunities, create more of infrastructure, and you will have every kind of industry coming in. So if agriculture has to be developed, it's not just private capital coming in, but providing digitalization, providing marketization, providing cold storages, providing marketing facilities, and providing a deepening or reaching out to remote areas, which would include travel, transportation, cold storages, health, and education. What's the model? Can the cities grow in its own enclave and keep the agriculture deprived? Therefore, the digital world provides an extremely good opportunity for us to see that cash is actually handed over to the beneficiary. It's a tremendous process by which you actually follow up after demonetization to see that you use digital apps to make payments. It has been a marvel, a miracle of sorts to see how we have converted the agricultural sector and made them use an IT solvent by getting them used to using the smartphones. Now use that model for education. So if you're looking at underdevelopment to be a feature of dualism, agriculture and industry being the rural sector and the urban sector being two different economies, then you're actually parceling your economy. You're making your economies two in one. The whole idea is to integrate and make it the same economy. As you would say in USA, the blue jeans and white shirts and sneakers is the culture of USA. Now, we don't have that in India. You have two different pockets. You have lungis and bidis in one area. You have soft suits and the latest brands in the other sector. Now, if you want to break this and create a larger market, that's the only way to grow. And this government has made that enormous step of integrating the economy. Now, that is where I think people are making a mistake to say, oh, what about unemployment? Now, tell me, how is there growth without employment generation? The form of employment, that is occupational generation, has changed. It has changed enormously, because now you're talking about startups, you're talking about entrepreneurship, you're talking about articulating the sectoral divide and getting into the rural sector. Great opportunities. So tomorrow you're not going to have B schools creating products or engineers marketable for Hindustan Levers to sell soap. You will have B schools to tell you how to search for new business opportunities and make your business wherever you land. Therefore, you have a new thought coming in, and that requires two things: deepening of inroads into the most penetrating areas, and of course, the commerce sector. The invisible sector, which we never discuss, is monetary policy, is doing a very good job, because you're keeping not only the rupee price under control. It's another issue why the rupee is sinking vis-a-vis the dollar. That requires another lecture. How does USA and India, both making deficit nations, have a widening gap in the deficit? But that requires a different theory altogether, which I think, I'm sure the students of finance would be addressing. We can spend another seminar on that. But having said that, the point is, we are now looking at an integrated economy for a change. We are looking at bullet trains. We are looking at faster communication. We are looking at the digital world. We are looking at the stock market. And overnight, India seems to be transformed into a new world. There are sectors and there are areas which are pockets of inefficiency. Let me explain one. You know, when you're talking about the deficits, as I was saying, fiscal deficit is acceptable because you are allowing capital expenditure, and that will give you a return sometime else. However, pure economists will say revenue deficit is not acceptable. So if you're having an ever-surging increase in revenue deficit, it means you're spending more than what you're earning on a day-to-day revenue expenditure bias. If effective revenue deficit is increasing, it means if I take away what you're investing in capital goods, is that still increasing? Yes, it is. What is absolutely indefensible is primary deficit is increasing. What does it mean? It means a zero primary deficit means your fiscal deficit is not incurring costs of interest. Now we are actually spending, increasing our primary deficit, which means a large chunk of our deficit is to pay back our borrowings. And if I look at these two sectors, which is the highest form of earning? It is borrowings. What is the highest form of leakage? It is interest payments. And what is it doing? It is giving a fiscal deficit of 85% over GDP. Our debt over GDP burden is 85%, just next to Brazil and Argentina. And this is unacceptable because the highest deficit should be 77%. How are we making hay? Because there's a new theory again which has come up. If the rate at which you are paying your debts is lower than the rate at which you're growing, then this debt is sustainable. But that's walking on a razor's edge. More than that, you're crowding out your investment for investment purposes. We are depending on selling off our silverware for a grand wedding. We are thinking in terms of disinvestment of public sector so that we get exchanges there. Our target was 65,000 crores. We are nowhere near that. So they are not going to shelve that. So the disinvestment policy has failed, but happily we have made money in another sector. NRIs are giving 3% of our GDP. Now that's a great thing happening, but that's not the way we wanted our intellectual elite to grow, not to go to another country and start making money. They could have used their talent in our own country. I think we don't see this in any other country. We don't see Chinese really leaving their shores to make their money somewhere else. Nor do we see the Germans or the British or the American giving up their home to set up their home here with the excuse, I'm going to send money home. And that used to happen on the colonial era. We are back on dirty technologies, which is mines and plantations, particularly in countries and states which are lagging behind. So there's a problem of backward development. Happily, this budget addresses that, saying that we are looking at Northeast, which is another great opportunity, because that's where your plantations are. That's where your woodwork is. You would be surprised to know that 40,000 crores of business lies in matchstick industry, and the wood is taken from Northeast and sent to Tamil Nadu, where you're getting your matchstick factories there. Now, this growth should be actually taking place in Northeast, but we need roads there. We need growth there. We need employment possibilities there. And if you're not having that, then they will go into narcotics production. And that explains a problem of a different kind, which is Manipur. So there are issues which we must look into. The deficit position on primary deficit and revenue deficit is indefensible. And when you're talking about efficiency, it's not just manufacturing efficiency. It's not just corporate efficiency. It's not MSME efficiency. I'd look at the two other departments of the government. It is legislature, it is executive, the government servants, and it is your judiciary. Explain in a syndrome when you're trying to increase your efficiency, how do you end up paying more and more salary without any accountability, with pay commissions and DA hikes to just one sector of the people, increasing your revenue budget. And therefore, your expenditure is going up because you take it as sacrosanct, the whole country must prop up the government sector. Why should we? And that's a question I think the thinking intelligent India must ask. If everybody is accountable, so are the government servants. If you're not allowing the DA to percolate to all levels, saying it's a state subject, then it cannot be just a priority that I'm doing well because I'm paying a higher DA and giving pay commissions to my workers. We are all in service of the nation. So this is a problem which is creating a divide. No wonder regional partisan policies are going up. Second is, if you look at judiciary, look at the slack there. Look at the question of 3 months of holidays in the summer vacation. Can this country afford this colonial yoke? We need more judgments. We need more permissions. We need more performance. So you cannot allow one sector to say it's your holiday time now. You break off at 4 o'clock. Others work till late night because it's a global world. And we have consulting firms working till late night because you have to be in link with USA. It's time all sectors fired in all cylinders and everybody put in a chipping hand. You can't have these drags on the nation in the form of judiciary, in the form of executive, where they take it as sacrosanct that my salaries are intact, my pay commissions are intact, and the rest of the country will pay this through their taxes. As it is, the tax over GDP ratio is expected to be 18%. A point of caution, we are perhaps thinking we are going to ride the crest of that performance when we say, okay, we have the largest demographic dividend coming from the emerging youth. And let me say, that's because the government failed in its family planning. And thank God it did, because we happen to have the largest growing youth population. But do you know the political status now that the population has stopped growing? We have become so soft, we have stopped multiplying. And in 25 years' time, this will vanish. In 2030, when we touch the 5 trillion mark, we will also be the largest population in India. That explains why the per capita income is not going up, because whereas your GDP is going up, your population is the largest in the country. So therefore, whereas in per capita income, we are 166th in the world. And this, the breathing space for your performance time is not 25 years. If by 2050 we have not made it, we've missed the bus. So therefore, there is no room for complacency. We have to continue this efficiency. Thankfully, the government is hitting at the right areas, from medicinal plants to agro-business to agro-industry to blue economy to MSME, right thinking. Efficiency in any form, inefficiency in any form cannot be tolerated. On MSME, the new thinking which has come up is circular economy. We can no longer talk in terms of just economic proficiency. We have to look at two other areas. One is socio-cultural areas, because otherwise it will not be sustainable, and the environmental context. And the 5 stages of production is take, make, use, distribute, and reuse. what we normally stress on in economics and business schools in make and take, how to produce in the efficient way, how to get the raw materials in the efficient ways. We do not look at distribution ethically. We do not look at use. How do we use material which is biodegradable? And we do not look at waste as a resource. In America, there are 350 products, leading industries, including shoes, which are using products of just rubber. And they are converting that rubber and you're using plastics for other purposes, including laying of roads. So we have to think in terms of using alternative technology and not use this or incinerate whatever we've created to call that a waste. There's nothing called waste. We have run out of ideas to know how to use it. Like we once upon a time thought population more than employment possibilities a waste. So control it. It's your lack of ideas that actually stops us from thinking. I mean, have you ever thought of looking at a gold mine and saying, oh, what do I do with this gold? You have to realize human resource is a resource. So not being able to use it is an incapacitation of your mind. You must learn how to use it. If China has done it, why can't we? And therefore, human resources have to be utilized in many ways. There's so many ways we can still use this labor to grow. And from the smallest corner to the largest, we have to develop. The other area which we have not looked into is exports. Now, we have been trying to promote MSMEs for exports. You don't have to think about a product. Think about a supply chain. Think about developing each product. I'll give you an example. Sushi Mukul Datta of Hindustan Levers said, in order to make a cup of tea, you go through 17 processes. You try to factor your cost into each process and reduce the cost there and perfect that. Just say somebody boils, somebody stirs, somebody brews tea, somebody mixes it, somebody puts it there. Imagine the scope of business we can do in a supply chain model using the manufacturing sector, the packaging sector, whatever sector in the processes. If you go to Bangladesh, you will find that there are shops there stitching St. Michael's label, and they make a pound. So if you get a pound, you got your 100 rupees while you're trying to produce a shirt for 100 rupees. So you factor in what you can do, and through the internet and your embassies get that information, and that's global ancillarization. That's what AT&T is doing. We have not looked at processes. We are looking at products. And this is where consulting firms need to come in a big way, not only for environmental clearances, but also to see that we all have a share in this beautiful global chain. And imagine if Bangladesh is doing something, India is doing something, Pakistan is perhaps putting it in packaging, why the Commonwealth would be created and we can create global wealth. We have not looked at our neighbors. The policy is still very insular. We have to look at our neighbors and put the country together. And only then, if European Union has made sense, there's a NAFTA, there's an American Union, there's an ASEAN, India as a subcontinent has to form that. And we have a few of these changes in X-M. Exports is lagging because global exports is lagging. But imports, we can perhaps not only replace. This budget is addressing that. It's talking about oil seeds where we used to import that in a big way. So from sesame to mustard oil to all the kind of oils that we need are now being developed in the country, which will stall our imports. We are putting our thoughts there, but there's much more to do. And I implore business schools, consulting firms to look into these areas and even debate if my ideas are wrong, that you're wrong there because this is right. But if you do not have a debate, if you don't articulate, you will be in this quagmire. So I can continue to give you more, but let me tell you, the real problem lies in the compression we made, that we are not generating enough resources. Expenditures are climbing, which means we will have to resort more and more to borrowings, and we will have to resort to more and more spending. The largest part of your pie, of your cake is going to borrowings and payments. We have to address this issue. Otherwise, that's not a sensible budget. I hope the next budget takes care of this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for such an enlightened view. In fact, you actually thrown open a lot of areas where opportunities is existing and government is working, and which focuses on the use of technology or the agro-based model. Focus on digital infrastructure, creation of more opportunities, and one such area where as a general citizen of the country, which we see and regularly witness growth changes, is infrastructure. Infrastructure in various ways, whether it is logistics, roads, transportation, so many areas. And to
I
take this
just need two
discussion,
more points which I missed out.
sir.
Let me add that up. If your industries are not coming and growing, then create opportunities. Roosevelt said, if you're down and out, declare war. Space research is one such. I think spiritual tourism that India has developed in the Ram Mandir, Kashi, and 150 kilometers away, that's a great idea. Thailand is Thailand because of this. Vatican is Vatican, Mecca is Mecca, only because you've looked at opportunities for people to come in, enjoy your climate, enjoy your opportunities, and that's a great idea. In 2 years' time, you'll find UP generating maximum resources because revenue will come. It does not matter what through what, as long as you create this activity.
Yes, sir. Point taken.
Second is, and that's a very serious point, that's the point is we normally say that the poverty and the inequality is increasing. According to the study, if you start measuring poverty, but if I take the low income group, the $2 a day standard, 11% of Indian population is below poverty line. That's a great achievement. But we are now a middle income economy. And if you take $3.5 a day, then 48% of the population is below that. That needs to be addressed. And the third issue is on vocational education. China spends 18.3%, Thailand 13%, India is just 4.5%. So we need to do something for the primary education. Sir. These are the three parting points that I should have addressed.
Now, I taking this discussion forward, sir. We have another very eminent panelist with us, Mr. Subhajit Chakraborty. Mr. Subhajit Chakraborty is the managing director of PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big four consulting firms. He holds a master's in business administration from Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Kolkata. He has more than 15 years of diverse industry experience with both government and the private sector clients. He has worked across sectors like information technology, logistics, infrastructure, and consulting. He specializes in infrastructure advisory across various areas like logistics, railways, industrial corridors, and large area development like SEZs, industrial parks, special investment regions, and smart cities. He has an extensive experience working with multilateral funding agencies like Asian Development Bank, Japan International Cooperation Agency, among others. He has worked with prominent national and international government entities like Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, DIPP, which is very, very, actively engaged in infrastructure development. Then Japan External Trade Organization, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI of Japan, and US-India Business Council, among others. He was part of the team which undertook the knowledge partners role to the government of Gujarat and assisted the government officials at the senior most level within the government of Gujarat in framing strategies for attracting investment to the state. So welcome, sir. And we would certainly be looking forward to hearing your views on how this country is moving as far as, because both these speakers have also talked about focusing on infrastructure, without which the economy cannot grow. So we would like to hear your views on where this growth on infrastructure is taking this country, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commander Raman. A very good afternoon to everyone on this webinar. It's really a great privilege for me to be on this panel discussion alongside such a distinguished set of speakers and panelists. My special thanks to the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, XLRI, and the organizing committee for having me here. I'm also accompanied by my senior colleague partner, Mr. Rajiv Basu, who is a partner and leader in the tax and regulatory and the EPB space, and he is an authority on the subject. I have a brief presentation which I will be using to deliver on the topic. Let me just put it on the screen for everyone. Let me know when my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
It's visible, sir. Yeah.
Sure. So I will be talking about the interim budget impact on the India's growth story from an infrastructure perspective, as we all would agree that the sector is definitely a backbone for the Indian economy to grow. So over the next, I'm conscious of the time, so over the next 14, 15 minutes, I will talk about the key trends in terms of the budget allocations for this sector, which are seemingly the thrust areas for the government. We will also be spotlighting on some of the key global trends and how the interim budget and the other government initiatives are responding to these global opportunities and trends, and also to make sure, essentially to make sure that the India's growth story remains buoyant. So that has been the key focus of these policies and the budget initiatives. Let me start straight away with the focus of government in terms of the capital expenditure that they have been doing. So in the current fiscal year that we are sitting in currently, the government is expected to have spent somewhere around $120+ billion, roughly around 10 lakh crore on the infrastructure sector. And this number, it is slated to go by another 11% over the next year, somewhere around 11.11 lakh crore, which in absolute terms, it would be almost 3x or 3 times the spend of the pre-COVID levels. And even as a percentage of GDP, if we look at it, this number, this overall expenditure will be around 4.6% vis-a-vis the 2.7% average which was seen in the pre-COVID days. So what this means is that clearly the government has been doing a lot of heavy lifting in the infrastructure development. And it also shows that the intent is definitely there. I think both Professor Pradhan and Professor Mukherjee, they kind of highlighted that the intent is very important for us to eventually get to the results. So I think what this is showing is that there is a strong intent that the government will continue to focus on the infrastructure development sector, which should further help in the Indian economy to remain a top performer amidst the current global kind of slowdown that we are seeing in some of the other economies. Now, if we take a deeper look into the capex plan, it suggests that there is a greater focus on some of the core sectors like transport and logistics. And as you can see that the railways and the roadways, these are literally getting the chunk of this capex allocation, which is there. And rightly so, because we all would agree that the logistics sector, it will play a very, very crucial role towards enhancing the overall India's competitiveness in manufacturing. So there is a lot of push on manufacturing. Professor Pradhan spoke about the Viksit Bharat. Before that, it was the Atmanirbhar Abhiyan, Atmanirbhar policy, which government was pushing in under, or the Make in India policy. So to bring these investors in manufacturing in the high-tech space, I think the logistics competitiveness will also play a very critical role in that. And not just the manufacturing, I think it would also have a snowball effect on the services sector. So a lot of services sector are required in terms of supporting the manufacturing sector. So I think that's also something which we are expecting, or the indications are there that this kind of a capex spend will lead to those kind of impact. And the stress on and the impetus on manufacturing, it is also evident as the government is laying a lot of impetus on the infrastructure development for manufacturing sector or the manufacturing ecosystem. So if you look at the allocations, whether it is towards the National Industrial Corridor Development and ICDC, it is working on those national level industrial corridors. It gets almost a 500 crore allocation. There are those sectoral contributions to sectors like telecom, semiconductor and display manufacturing ecosystem sector, pharma. So these are again the sectors which are getting a lot of thrust. And also there is an impetus, or there is a focus on development of industrially backward and the remote areas. So that's also a good thing, which gets almost a 1,500 crore of allocation over there. So overall, if we have to look at these numbers, I think it's evident that there is almost a 53% hike in the industrial development projects spent, which is there over and above what it was in the last financial year. I think one of the closing points of Professor Mukherjee was around tourism and the kind of tourism asset which recently in the state of Uttar Pradesh it has been developed. I think it's a very valid point, sir, which you had made. And if you look at the intent again from a spend trend, tourism infrastructure development, it is getting a lot of focus from the government. It is on the services side, but government has identified that tourism infrastructure development will continue to be one of its focus areas, and it will be focusing more on both the aspects. One is on improving the existing tourism assets as well as creation of a lot of new tourism destinations. So if I have to kind of summarize, these are the three key sectors or focus sectors for the government, and this is also adequately reflected in the interim budget. So one is, of course, the transport and connect the transport and logistics sector, the manufacturing and tourism. Now, let me delve a bit deeper into each one of them to talk about what are the global trends and, like I said earlier, that how we are responding to these opportunities. So, to start with manufacturing, I think most of us are aware of the significant supply chain disruptions that are happening, not just due to the various geopolitical issues. So, whether it is the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the recent Israel-Palestine conflict, and even prior to that, the entire COVID-19 pandemic, and even before that, the US-China trade wars. Each of these seemingly black swan events, if I can just call them, they have had a significant impact on the overall global supply chains, and the global investors are increasingly looking to shorten these supply chains or these chains in order to kind of come closer to the consumers, the actual consumers of various products. So what this essentially means is that they are looking for nearshoring. They are looking for identifying new locations where they can kind of partially relocate their manufacturing. So all this China plus one, China plus two, these kind of strategies which we have been hearing, this is something which is very significant. Similarly, if you look at some of the other key trends, for example, Industry 4.0 transition, the focus on sustainability and green manufacturing, the green manufacturing practices, the shift towards high value added manufacturing, these are also some of the defining priorities globally. Now, we believe that the government of India is also cognizant of these changes, and we are responding strongly through some of the enabling policies. And the budget allocation is kind of a reflection of some of these. For example, if you look at the PLI, so I think Mr. Pradhan had also highlighted that the PLI allocation for some of the new sectors that they have called out, it may not have been significant, but what the government is doing, that there is a continuation of the PLI spend which was announced earlier. So those allocations, if you look at the detailed things, though there they have actually increased those allocations. The funds for R&D is something which is very significant. That the National Green Hydrogen Mission, the biomanufacturing, these are all kind of very good initiatives to respond to some of these global trends or opportunities that we are seeing. Just kind of delving a bit further deeper into this, if you look at, the government is actually quite keen to kind of invest or introduce new PLI schemes for sectors like toys, leather, and footwear industries, and so on. Now, these are interestingly the labor intensive sectors. But what is more interesting to note is that while the government is announcing these or is planning to bring these newer PLI 2.0 for some of the existing announcements, or adding some new sectors into PLI, the focus is always on high value added segments. So even when we're talking about leather and footwear, the fine print which government is trying to focus is that how do we kind of encourage investment into some of the products, for example, the apparel wear, the footwear, the running shoes, the running gears, which are much more popular both within from a domestic consumption perspective and also from an international market perspective. That's where there's a higher value to be realized, and that's where the government has been focusing. So even if you look at some of the previous announcements like the auto, medical devices, pharma, specialty steel, the focus of the government has been that how do we incentivize these investments into very high value added segments, not to kind of continue to focus on the traditional products which were in any case getting manufactured, but rather to bring some indigenous new technologies to be brought in and promote new investments into these kind of innovative products. So that has been an interesting aspect of it. I think what is also very, very important is that from a private sector perspective, one has to identify that what does this really mean, these PLI schemes. So they typically, if you look at any of these PLI, there's a 4 to 6% of reimbursement on how much incremental sale that you are doing. So in one way, it is kind of incentivizing greater manufacturing, both which can kind of cater to the domestic as well as to the international exports demand. On top of that, if you also add the kind of state incentives which some of the states are providing under the industrial policy, overall the manufacturing for an investor, almost around 25 to 40% of its capex is actually getting reimbursed. Now, what this is leading to is that there is a much greater competitiveness in terms of how they can resort or how they can compete in the global market, because the kind of gap which was there in terms of the economies of scale benefit that China was able to bring, or even Vietnam now in few cases, the government is trying to find a way that how can we also make the manufacturing in these new age products or innovative products more competitive. So that's something which is very, very interesting. The second key sectoral focus, which I mentioned, it is before that, I think I'll also quickly cover the R&D bit of it. I think the government also announced this time there's a 1 lakh crore corpus for allocation to offer long-term financial support at either zero or minimal interest rates to new technology areas such as deep defense tech, medtech, and so on. So this is also a very interesting area because kind of resonating the previous speakers' thoughts that these are the areas or these are the sub-sectors where there is going to be a lot of demand going forward. So in a way, the good part is that government, through its budgets and through its policies, it is preparing our manufacturing ecosystem to be ready to respond to the future of the consumer demand, so the future of manufacturing sector demand. So that's a very, very positive thing. The second key sectoral focus, which I had highlighted earlier, was in the transport and logistics sector. Here again, if you look at some of the global trends, there is an increased focus on localization of supply chains, which is also coming from, I kind of touched upon that during the manufacturing side of it. Greater focus on intermodal connectivity, sustainability, emission reduction, and digitalization, which is also kind of paving the way for an increased private sector participation in sectors which are heavy, which are capex heavy, or you can also say these could be the go long infra assets like ports, airports, among others. So even for India, if you look at the policy push on developing the dedicated freight corridors, the Gati Shakti multimodal cargo terminal, the port modernization, national highway development, etc. All these has been quite phenomenal initiatives from the government of India side. So I think the recent budget, it kind of re-emphasizes that this focus will continue to be there. The announcement of these 3 major railway corridors to enable multimodal connectivity, and including the port connectivity corridor, the energy, mineral, and cement corridor, the high traffic density corridor. All these are kind of massive opportunities for the private sector players as well, including if you look at the OEMs, the ancillary providers, the logistics service sector providers, apart from the EPCs. The EPCs, of course, will have a much larger play. Similarly, if you look at the urban mobility sector, the road safety and carbon emission reduction, these are some of the key priority areas when it comes to the urban mobility sector. Here again, the capex allocation for MRTS projects, the metro projects, they have really gone up by almost 8%. There's an enhanced focus on expanding the last mile linkages with airports, etc. There is also a greater emphasis on road safety and women's safety programs, which will be a very good opportunity for private sector players who are investing in the electronic monitoring device manufacturing, AI-related cameras, intelligent traffic management systems, the integrators for these systems, and other service providers, so on. So, and I think those of you who have experienced the Vande Bharat trains, they will vouch for the focus on passenger comfort and experience, which also means that there is a greater focus on the OEMs, the ancillary manufacture of these bogies, as well as the indirect impact on the railway service providers. So that's another interesting area which will see lot of demand and lot of growth in the future. I'll move to the third key segment, and I'm being kind of conscious of the overall time that we have. So I'll just quickly kind of shift the focus on what are the key global trends here. Now, especially during the pandemic, we have seen that the tourism sector really got battered big time, and therefore there was a significant focus as to how do we revive this sector as a whole. Now, globally, there are some interesting trends also which kind of emerge. For example, there's a preference for vacations, as we know, the digital nomads. There is an increased spend or increased focus on this particular trend. Women and solo travelers, we have seen that almost there's a 30% plus growth in this particular segment, and it is expected to continue. There is also a very increased preference for ecotourism and rural tourism amongst the new trends which are being observed. So if you look at the government of India, it is also focusing and it is according a lot of importance on capturing these opportunities. And therefore, there is a lot of focus on developing the tier 2 and tier 3 destinations destinations as new tourist places or iconic tourist places. And the Swadesh Darshan scheme of government, this is one of the, you can say, initiatives which is following a very destination-based approach, where the focus is that how do we develop the last mile connectivity or some of the other gaps which are there in some of the existing and the other futuristic tourist destinations that they intend to develop. There is also a focus on religious and spiritual tourism. This point was also, I think, Professor Mukherjee, you had pointed this out. And there is the Prashad scheme, which stands for Pilgrimage, Rejuvenation, and Spiritual Augmentation Drive. So this is essentially to identify that which could be some of those pilgrimage sites where the religious tourism experience for the ever-growing religious tourists in the country, that could be enhanced. So that's also another key focus area for the government. Now, if you look at the interim budget, it offers almost a 45% increase for this sector as a whole, and predominantly again to develop these new iconic tourist destinations as well as to boost the various states' ability to market some of these tourism assets that they already entail. So that's something which I think the government of India is rightly doing, and the current policy ecosystem and the policy enablers that they are bringing out with, that is in the right direction, if I may put it like that. So this kind of brings me close to the end of my presentation. I'll just like to summarize by saying that while the intent of government to continue to do this heavy lifting on infrastructure, capital expenditure, it is very evident. And the private sector, hopefully, it will respond quite well to these initiatives. But what will also be important is to help the private sector in tackling some of the other challenges that they are faced with. For example, I think MSME was one sector which was being spoke about. So from a manufacturing lens, if you look at we are focusing a lot on developing new industrial infrastructure, but there are other challenges which the MSME sector is facing in terms of them having the access to right kind of financing, instruments of financing, availability at the palatable cost of capital, their own credit worthiness in few cases. Secondly, I think the ease of doing business initiatives, that will be very, very important, especially to help the private sector tackle various cost overruns and time overruns as and when they deliver on these large infrastructure projects. And lastly, I think there has to be a huge focus on bridging the skill gap, especially when at a time when we are talking about bringing these very high value added sectors both on the manufacturing and on the services side to India. So that's also one area which really needs a lot of focus in order to translate some of these spends in infrastructure and be the best results for us. So that's very briefly on the infrastructure perspective that I wanted to present. So I'll just stop here. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subhajit. It was a very, very elaborate, very exhaustive presentation. And, for a common man, this is what the exactly decoding of the budget mean, because many of those, financial terms, a common man may not be able to understand, but you have actually explained it very, very beautifully. I'm sure there will be some questions from the student fraternity, but before I go there, do we have Mr. Chajjar here online? Is he still? Yes, we have our regional president, Mr. Chajjar. He had requested that he would like to, pose a question to this panelist. And I would request Chajjar sir, kindly, go ahead with your question, and then we would take up questions from the student fraternity.
Thank you, Commander Aman. Thank you, Mr. Kamani. And of course, Professor Suman Mukherjee, I'm seeing after a long time. How are you, sir? And thank you to Professor Pradhan and Subhajit Chakravarti. So it has been an experience that I was looking forward, because the way this interim budget has been broken today. In fact, this time around in Calcutta, I could not rather attend any such event, which could have broken the budget the way as a common man or as a common citizen we would like to see. And all the three panelists have broken it down to an extent that it becomes so very much easy for understanding. Just a small comment, no question per se, because I think that the finance minister is seized with the idea that a lot of emphasis has to be given on the infrastructure sector. And that is what they are providing in continuity of the earlier budget. And I'm sure whatever the next government comes, they have to continue with that kind of a situation or that kind of allocation, because it is the road and the railway network which is going to take us forward from now onwards. And if you're looking for the third largest economy, and that is by say 2029 or 2030, then those are the two areas that we have to really focus upon, and government is doing its part. One point that Mr. Subhajit Chakravarti mentioned about the ease of doing business. Somehow or other, this has been the phrase which Prime Minister Modi has been using since the time that he came to power in 2014. But somehow or other, I feel that it hasn't taken off. And that is the reason that kind of investment in terms of in the manufacturing area by international players is not happening. And even if I look presently, you see the kind of negotiation government is having with largest players of the world. And that is in relation to, I believe, ease of doing business is being a handicap. So government has to do much on that area. And if they could do really further in that area, then it will be much easier for the foreign people to come in and invest here. And that applies to the private sector players in India as well, because end of the day, any large project coming in, and if he has to go around knocking at the doors of the many agencies, then it becomes quite difficult. Of course, it appears in the paper, and any department that one might visit, you get a sense that they are conscious of the fact that they have to provide ease of doing business. But that is lacking because of the policy decision at the helm, which is at the highest level. So this is one area that one representation needs to go to the finance ministry, that actually they need to work a large. What Professor Mukherjee mentioned about and the comparison that you drew from farmers to the manufacturing and to the services, which is actually the requirement of the day, and the government is also working in the direction. The skill gap remains in our country, which I think again we are going in the right direction to be able to fulfill that. Yes, the employment generation, as Professor Pradhan mentioned, it remains an issue. But having said so, I mean, that is one area that if you look at the PF or the ESI things, the employment in the corporate area or in the area of manufacturing or services is not happening. But fact of the matter also remains that after this program of the present government of providing micro loans and against CGM TMSE, which is up to 5 crores of loan will be provided to anyone coming forward to set up own unit. So that gives a good playing field to the lot of budding entrepreneurs, and he himself of becoming an employee becomes an employer. So these are the few things that I came to my mind, and since a large student fraternity is present here, I thought I'll share those views of mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. For the benefit of the audience, Mr. R.K. Chhajjar is the regional president of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, East India Council. And thank you, sir. Actually, you ideally summed up the entire discussion which the panelists have shared. So I thank you for doing this and sharing your views. Now I would request maybe Nikki or Rohan, anybody, if there are questions from the student fraternity. There are some questions which I see in the chat box, but I would leave it to them to take up the questions if there are.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much to the panelists. So I would like to proceed with the first question which we have received from the student side. The question is, given the economic volatilities, how should small business adjust the course of their corporate strategy, operations, and its investment plans in response to the interim budget? So any speaker would like to take it up.
You see,
Professor Suman Mukherjee should take it.
yeah, there are 3 issues here. Firstly, we are still confused about what is small. The definition that we use does not give a distinction between plant size, firm size, and industry size. You see, you could have a small plant dominated, small industry, small firm, small industry. But you could have a small industry in a medium plant dominated. Why am I saying that? It's only if your plant size is small, would you be labor intensive? So there is no guarantee that you won't have a capital intensive plant which is small in terms of capital outlay. So one of the factors that perhaps you overlook is that employment generation does not necessarily come with small scale. The second point that we're trying to overlook is the dominant plant size lead to agglomerative tendencies like jute industry. These tend together, although it's a large industry, but it's medium plant dominated because they get the benefits of economies of scale. Unless industrial economics is understood, you cannot develop a sector or a state by just promoting small scale or startups. There are certain logistics by which they move. There is a market pull, there is a labor pull, there's a raw material pull. These 3 pulls create the critical isodopanes to know where you should be located. So once you agree on that, then you know the best way small scale can perform, be it medium or large, is when they have subcontracting or ancillary growth, which is why the volatility that you refer to will actually be reflected on 2 things. How is the larger parent, which is what it's ancillarized to, operating under that. So in an ancillary, you get protected because you get assured supplies, you get no delayed payments, you get technology, you get sustainability issues being explained to you, and to a large extent, you have an assured market. So the small scale is better off getting into this bandwagon unless you happen to be in a boutique economy, like a perishable good, a bakery, or confectionery, or embroidery. Those have its own logistics, and therefore it'll never be displaced. So there needs to be a full grounding of industrial economics here before you make a policy on this, assuming that what I call small is small. There is a capital measurement, there's a horsepower per operative measurement, and there's a large size firm measurement. So these three are absolutely dealing. We still not have arrived on knowing the difference between plant size, firm size, and industry size. That's where we are going wrong with small scale.
Thank you so much, Professor Suman, for that.
If I may just add a couple of more points to that. I think if I understood the question correctly, while Professor Mukherjee had very rightly, spoken about it, I would also say a couple of more points around that. See, if I talk about the small businesses and if I talk about the MSMEs, while we work a lot on the transformation of the sector, we as PwC we have been working on a lot of these sector-related, you can say, policy enablement. We also found that in many cases, the actual business owners, the businesses, they are also not very aware. They're also not very forthcoming. What I mean by that is we have seen on ground, these are like very on ground challenges. Many of the small businesses, they do not intend to become big. Reason being, and I can tell you from where I'm coming from, there are examples where, for example, the cash payments, the entire systems that they kind of follow in terms of procuring their own payments to their own sub vendors and so on. There is very little of you can say transparency, or some of them, I would say, they do not want to go on that path where things are becoming more transparent and so on. They want to remain small, and that's where they are also losing out on some of the massive benefits which are available to many of those players. So I think one is there has to be some bit of introspection, there has to be some bit of cleanup that they need to do on their own internal systems in order to become ready to embrace the change. So embracing the change is something which I would say as one. The second is, I think there is a lack of awareness. So on one side, it is, of course, the government is doing a lot through its own policies and promotion and marketing. Even the small businesses, the MSMEs, they also need to play their part in terms of actively reaching out. There are now a lot of platforms available which are either funded through state governments or even multilateral funding, which are helping them on two things. One is how do they network with other outside markets, so market outside of India and even market outside of the state where they're operating in. The second thing is that their own processes, etc. There are a lot of training which is needed. So which are the products to identify where exactly the opportunities are. So all this budget related analysis and those things that we are doing, it is throwing to a large extent that which are those specific products or segments where there is going to be higher opportunities, and also what is really needed to kind of respond to international requirements. So is there a requirement of certain types of labeling to be done? The packaging needs to be done in a certain way to export to certain markets. Now all those things, unless and until the small businesses are also forthcoming and investing their time and energy on kind of redefining themselves, it will be difficult for them to sustain in this competitive environment that we are living in. So I think it's on both the sides. One is on the government side through their policies and enabling ecosystems. The other is on these businesses as well. I'll just stop here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Nikki, any other question, please?
Yes, sir. So moving to the next question. Raghuram Rajan, during his tenure as RBI governor, highlighted India shouldn't focus on manufacturing rather than non-manufacturing ways for job creation. He also highlighted manufacturing was a job creator when China initiated it. Today, with over-changing economic scenario, India should focus more on services. However, with AI coming in and Indian IT sector losing its shine in recent past, will it be able to consume the demographic dividend India has to offer? So, any person who would like to take it up?
I think I answered that question already when you said that luckily our family planning program failed, and therefore we've been able to draw richly on the demographic dividend. It has got nothing to do with government policy. It in fact shows that sometimes when your thinking is warped, you're better off. And there is the BBC program which says Golden Hawk argument. We try to push all our problems into the basket of poverty and overpopulation by saying you're poor because you're overpopulated, you don't have jobs because you're overpopulated. But let's look at it the other way around. If there were no births declared today, would you have solved your unemployment problem? So it will remain for the next 20 years. Or for that matter, when you look at poverty, it is now found out that the best way to tackle poverty is to grow more food and sell it free to the people. The single most important reason why poverty has reduced in the country is we are dishing out food and keeping it low. So this is economic theory for you. But your question was more pertinent, and that was if you repeated that there was another edge to it. What was that?
Sure, sir. So, however, with AI coming in and Indian IT sector losing its shine in recent past, will it be able to consume the demographic dividend India has to offer?
No, firstly, it's not lost its shine. It needs to be expanded, more deepening, because you have a large rural sector, and from education to deployment and of resources, penetration to that, there's a huge scope left. And AI has not even arrived, so it's not depleting. It is research, and R&D has not been able to use it so productively because it is very expensive and it can be put into limited sphere. But you know, there is another forum which has come up in Australia talking about experiential learning. So we need to bring in that in a big way in India. And now the present NAC record shows that educational curriculum, including UGC, says should look at experiential planning. You have to learn from people of experience because theory changes faster than you think. So like I told you about the thinking and planning, that has changed drastically. We have gone off planning. So yes, AI is declining, and it's wrong to believe only manufacturing can create skilled services. Today, 90%, 19% is coming from agriculture. There's huge scope there. 24% comes from manufacturing. 56% comes from services. So if you can't do anything, then provide a service. Scotland is using Airbnb to sell its tourist traffic. So service is always wanted. It has got very little to do with manufacturing and upkeep with manufacturing. In fact, many of the companies now stop selling spares and parts. So service is in its league of its own. But it's unfortunate that we are looking at services because it's by itself, the margin that you get from services is much lower than the value-added component of manufacturing. So if you put your trust on manufacturing, the growth becomes a bit faster and it becomes more visible. Services like what you get in your home, your domestic workers keeping your home clean, and it adds to your fashion and your taste, but you don't see who's behind it. So service is something which is less tangible, unless it's awkwardly shown in the form of IR center or a driving center. That becomes a service which is more apparent. But I think tomorrow, the third sector, which is the service sector, has to grow because your agricultural sector is not giving place to industry. It's remaining where it is. So services will have to reach out to the rural sector. That's going to be the future.
We'll take one more question because we have already overshot the time. One last question, then we will wind it up. You can decide.
Sure, sir. So moving to the next question. During 1970s, India was always criticized for Hindu rate of growth. At present also, we are witnessing same scenario where Indian economy is growing without producing employment. What can India do to increase the employment rate?
I think I discussed this at the very outset when I said our idea of growth was this is the Harrod-Doma model. Growth is equal to, it's a fulcrum of savings over capital output ratio. We took capital output ratio, which is technology has given, because we took the the British capital output ratio, 4:1 is our denominator. So we started concentrating on 15% going up to 25%, divided by 4, we should safely be getting 5%. We never got it. And that led to what we call the savings puzzle. And this is what Rajkrishna referred to as the Hindu rate of growth. Do what you like, but it's not going to move away from 3.5%. That's what he meant by Hindu rate of growth, 3.5%. Then they started looking at where's the money going. And they found that the two sectors where it was trapped is real estate. And therefore, they brought in gold ceiling. And they found that it's, land ceiling. And they found the next area was gold. And there was, of course, the third argument. This is nominal savings, not real savings. Go back and flush cut to what happened after Modi came in. The same two issues came up. There is a third point. It is real estate. It was no longer land ceiling. It was gold again, and it was stock. So Rajan was primarily asked to look into this, and he said, all the big notes are getting trapped in these two sectors, so that's not translating into this. So if you move away from the savings, the question is, where would you get your investment from? So the investment can come from two sources, taxing the people and pushing it in, or printing money and putting it in, or borrowing money and putting it in. And the fourth area is FDI, which is a foreign direct investment. If the global economy is slackening down, that's not a sector. If you're borrowing, then you must see that your growth rate is higher than the rate of interest being charged, then that's sustainable. But investment is the option out. And that is where I think the development of the bond market or the stock market is extremely important, because only when the stock market grows would you be thinking of new ideas and telling people to come up with it. You know, the litmus test of a country's transparency is when people are pushing your ideas and investing it on equity capital. Unfortunately, we are still playing safe and going into the debt market, and you're not putting in the equity market. The day that happens, India will surge forward. And that's why tourism and travel is your path setters, because people want to move, and that is your path setter, not manufacturing.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. I think your views, your thoughts have been so profound, and I see a lot of questions. But maybe with the Medallion and the FINAC committee, we will organize one separate session with you, speaking on the various economic aspects. Because
please tell FINAC to organize a meet for the students. I'll go and spend an entire evening with them and discuss.
Yes, sir. We'll work towards that. So we'll work towards that. Thank you very much. And we have now come to close of the session. I would like to thank all the panelists, particularly the PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Rajiv Basu from PricewaterhouseCoopers. He has been so very supportive and holding my hand in developing this entire concept. Miss Madhushri Daitri, who was our consultant for IACC, and who came she came up with this idea of organizing that. The entire student community of XLRI, who have always been very, very supportive. Whenever XLRI has been an association member of IACC, and whenever we have approached them through various professors, this time it was Professor Girdhar, and who connected me to the right people. Earlier also, we have done this kind of session. So the entire student community of XLRI, and we look forward to many more such sessions with them. The regional office and the head office of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, particularly Mr. Sagar from the head office, who have been so helpful in setting up this entire Zoom meeting. And I would only like to sum it up and say, taking a cue or an acronym from my own book, which I had written, which is primarily on leadership. And that is the essence of this, which is the intent of the organization, the intent of the government, which is the vichar of the organization or the government, or whichever way you call. What is the behavior or the actions of the organizations, which I have said, which is the achar of the organization. From the vichar stems the achar, and subsequently it is the duty of the government and that it should reach out to the people. It should benefit not only the government but all stakeholders, which includes the society and the environment, the people, and everybody else. And so it should do the prachar of what they are doing. So from vichar stems the achar and then the prachar. And in the summation of entire thing, I think this is what the essence of our discussion is also all about. We have talked about the economy and how the government is translating that entire thing on ground, which Mr. Subhajit very rightfully and very beautifully brought it out. So thank you very much. All the people, all participants who have taken time out to spend this Saturday morning. We had a very, very good participation also, more than 50. So all the thank you to everyone, all the participants, and we'll close with this.